Okay, everything has been settled. Company is here. I've showered. I'm not sure how long I'm gonna get to stay because I think I'm gonna have to go down to eat. But until then, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna keep doing what we've been doing. And after we eat, I think I can get back up. And I might be able to say no thank you because they're making some weird vegetarian food, and I don't know. I kind of don't even feel hungry because I did eat earlier. I probably shouldn't have. I ate like 3-4 o'clock, and I eat kind of heavy, so I'm not very hungry. Okay, anyways, let's pull up the chat. Okay, so chat is now up. Okay, I'm gonna remake the amino chat actually. Hi. Were you watching it? You watching? I'm not really that hungry. I had good food.
That's okay. I'm here for you.
I know.
Okay? You good?
Look at all these annotations.
I know.
So many. And I'm right.
Where are you?
I'm here. I read all of this today and yesterday.
So you're halfway through?
More than halfway. And there's only basically 5 more kind of long chapters. I have to do my laundry tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
I can't do it tonight.
No, you have to finish that.
I know. That's why I'm...
Finish that.
So I kind of... I didn't mean to... I made grilled cheese for Liam, and then he didn't...
Okay.
And then he didn't eat it.
Uh-huh.
So I had to eat it.
It's okay.
He was like, it's burnt, and I'm not hungry.
You're telling everybody.
I don't know. There's actually no one here right now.
Oh, there's nobody that's watching you?
It says there's one person watching.
Yeah, that's me.
See, so, just you. You're the only person right now. I'm gonna make a thing for some people to show up. It's Keen. Okay. Okay, so okay, so let me just tell. So the stream is live again. Grab the link. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna make another one of these chats. So I'm gonna copy the description. Public chat. Free art. free art. I've been waiting, lol. Well, welcome. Okay, so I've got the amino chats, the new amino chat up. So let me post that really quick, the link to it. There we go. So, let me go get my Foxy. You and all that. Also, I'm live again. Okay. I'm gonna wait for a couple more people to show up, then I'll get started. Again, well, more than halfway through. I didn't get any sticky notes on this one. So, we are about to start. Did I write anything? My dad's. So loud. But not bad. It's like... He has a very strong, echoey voice, I guess. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but... Well, you guys can barely even hear the music. I doubt you can hear him. Okay. I don't think anyone else new is going to be showing up. I've made the chat, so I think I can get started. Okay. There's only 700 people online on Amino right now. That's insane. Okay. Maybe some people will start joining later. Let's just get right into it. We're about to start reading style. Nobody right now I can see is here from the last one, so I'm just gonna skip the trivia question for ambush. But we can get right into reading style next. Let's also put on this one. Style. There was no music. Most of the hamlet had burned down, including her house, which was now smoke, and the girl danced with her eyes half closed, her feet bare. She was maybe 14. She had black hair and brown skin. "Why is she dancing?" Azar said. We searched through the wreckage, but there wasn't much to find. Rat Kiley caught a chicken for dinner. Lieutenant Cross radioed up to the gunships and told them to go away. The girl danced mostly on her toes. She took tiny steps in the dirt in front of her house, sometimes making a slow twirl, sometimes smiling to herself. "Why is she dancing?" Azar said. And Henry Dobbins said it didn't matter why, she just was. Later we found her family in the house. They were dead and badly burned. It wasn't a big family, an infant and an old woman and a woman whose age was hard to tell. When we dragged them out, the girl kept dancing. She put her palms of her hands against her ears, which must have meant something, and she danced sideways for a short while, and then backwards, and then backwards. She did a graceful movement with her lips. "Well, I don't get it," Azar said. The smoke from the hooches smelled like straw. It moved in patches across the village square, not thick anymore, sometimes just faint ripples like fog. There were dead pigs, too. The girl went up on her toes and made a slow turn and danced through the smoke. Her face had a dreamy look, quiet and composed. A while later, while we moved out of the hamlet, she was still dancing. "Probably some weird ritual," Azar said, but Henry Dobbins looked back and said no. The girl just liked to dance. That night, after we'd marched away from the smoking village, Azar mocked the girl's dancing. He did funny jumps and spins. He put the palms of his hands against his ears and danced sideways for a little, and then backwards, and then did an erotic thing with his lips. But Henry Dobbins, who moved gracefully for such a man, took Azar from behind and lifted him up and carried him over to a deep well and asked if he wanted to be dumped in. Azar said no. "All right then," Henry Dobbins said. "Dance right." I don't really get the point of this chapter at all. Like at all. I really don't get this one. It's a 2-page thing. There's practically no information. You don't get any backstory. I don't know. I'm just gonna say that. I don't understand the dancing girl. I can't tell what the significance is. Significance is. Yeah, I really can't tell what the significance of that is. Man. Alright. So since this one was short, and right now there's not a lot of viewers, I'm not going to do the sketch thing for it. I feel like that should be more for the people that sit through, like, the really long ones, you know? So I'm going to start reading the next one. Speaking of courage. The war was over, and there was no place in particular to go. Norman Boker followed the tar road on its 7-mile loop around the lake. Then he started all over again, driving slowly, feeling safe inside his father's big Chevy, now and then looking out on the lake. Oof. looking out on the lake to watch the boats and water skiers and scenery. It was Sunday, and it was summer, and the town seemed pretty much the same. The lake lay flat and silvery against the sun. Along the road, the houses were all low-slung and split-level and modern, with big porches and picture windows facing the water. The lawns were spacious. Means they had lots of... No, that's capacious. Copious? Okay, spacious. There's a lot of space. On the lake side of the road, where real estate was most valuable, the houses were handsome and set deep in, well kept and brightly painted, with docks jutting out into the lake, and boats moored and covered and with canvas, and neat gardens, and sometimes even gardeners, and stone patios with barbecue spits and grills, wooden shingles saying who lived there. On the other side of the road, to his left, the houses were also handsome, though less expensive, on a smaller scale, with no docks or boats or gardeners. The road was a sort of boundary between the affluent and the almost affluent, and to live on the lakeside of the road was one of the few natural privileges in a town of the prairie, the difference between watching the sunset over cornfields or over water. It was a graceful, good-sized lake. Back in high school, at night, he had driven around it with Sally Carmer, wondering if she'd want to pull into the shelter of Sunset Park, or other times with his friends, talking about urgent matters, worrying about the existence of God and theories of causation. Then, there had not been a war. But there had always been the lake, which was the town's first cause of existence, a place for immigrant settlers to put down their loads. Before the settlers were in Sioux, S-I-O-U-X, Sioux, or something. And before the Sioux were the vast open prairies, and before the prairies there was only ice. The lake bed had been dug out by the southernmost advance of the Wisconsin Glacier. Fed by neither streams nor springs, the lake was often filthy and algaed, relying on fickle prairie rains for replenishment. Still, it was the only important body of water within 40 miles. Sioux? It's pronounced Sioux. Sioux. Okay. Alright, I had no clue what that was. I knew I'd seen it, but I completely forgot how to say that. Sioux. Okay. Still, it was the only important body of water within 40 miles. A source of pride, nice to look at on bright summer days, and later that evening it would color up with fireworks. Now, in the late afternoon, it lay calm and smooth, a good audience for silence, a 7-mile circumference that could be traveled by slow car in 25 minutes. It was not such a good lake for swimming. After high school, he'd caught an ear infection and had almost kept him out of the war. And the lake had drowned his friend Max Arnold, keeping him out of the war entirely. Max had been one who liked to talk about the existence of God. No, I'm not saying that, he'd argue against the drone of the engine. I'm saying it's possible as an idea, even necessary as an idea, a final cause of the whole structure of causation. Now he knew, perhaps. Before the war, they'd driven wait. Hold on now. Now he knew? That's like, dang. I think they're talking about because he died, like he would know about God and what happens afterward and everything. I have one more rhetorical device thing. This is my last one for rhetorical devices. Oof. I'm running low on sticky notes. Okay, let's say this was impactful. Before the war, they'd driven around the lake as friends, but now Max was just an idea, and most of Norman Boker's other friends were living in Des Moines or Sioux City, or going to school somewhere, or holding down jobs. The high school girls were mostly gone or married. Sally Kramer, whose pictures he had once carried in his wallet, was one who had married. Her name was now Sally Gustafson. I'm not saying that. And she lived in a pleasant blue house on the less expensive side of the lake road. On his third day home, he'd seen her out mowing the lawn, still pretty in a lacy red blouse and white shorts. For a moment he'd almost pulled over, just to talk, but instead he'd pushed down hard on the gas pedal. She looked happy. She had her house and her new husband, and there was really nothing he could say to her. The town seemed remote somehow. Sally was married, and Max was drowned, and his father was at home watching baseball on national TV. Norman Boker shrugged. "No problem," he murmured. Clockwise, as if in orbit. What's orbit? Okay. Clockwise, as if in orbit, he took the Chevy on another 7-mile turn around the lake. Even in late afternoon, the day was hot. He turned on the air conditioner, then the radio, and he leaned back and let the cold air and music blow over him. Along the road, kicking stones in front of them, 2 young boys were hiking with knapsacks and toy rifles and canteens. He honked going by, but neither boy looked up. Already he had passed them 6 times, 42 times, nearly 3 hours without stop. He watched the boys recede in his rearview mirror. They turned a soft brownish color, like sand, before finally disappearing. He tapped down lightly on the accelerator. Out on the lake, a man's motorboat had stalled. The man was bent over in the engine with a wrench and a frown. Beyond the stalled boat, there were other boats, and a few water skiers, and the smooth July waters, and an immense flatness everywhere. Two mud hens floated stiffly between a white dock. The road curved west, and the sun had now dipped low. He figured it was close to 5 o'clock. 20 after, he guessed. The war had taught him to tell time without clocks, and even at night, waking from sleep, he could unusually place it within 10 minutes either way. What he should do, he thought, is stop at Sally's house and impress her with this new time-telling trick of his. They'd talk for a while, catch up on things, and then he'd say, "Well, better hit the road. That's 5:34. And she'd glance at her wristwatch and say, "Hey, how'd you do that?" And he'd give a casual shrug and tell her it was just one of those things that you pick up. He'd keep it light. He wouldn't say anything about anything. "How's it being married?" he might ask, and he'd nod at whatever she answered with, and he would not say a word about how he'd almost won the Silver Star for valor. Oof. He drove past the Slater Park and across the causeway and past Sunset Park. The radio announcer sounded tired. The temperature in Des Moines was 81 degrees, and the time was 5:35, and "all you on the road drive extra careful now on the fine 4th of July. If Sally had not been married, or if his father were not such a baseball fan, it would have been a good time to talk. "The Silver Star?" his father might have said. "Yeah, but I didn't get it. Almost, but not quite." And his father would have nodded, knowing full well that many brave men did not win medals for their bravery, and that others win medals for doing nothing. As a starting point, maybe, Norman Boker might then have listed the 7 medals he did win: the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Air Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Good Conduct Medal, the Vietnam Campaign Medal, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart. Though his wound was minor and and did not leave a scar, and did not hurt, and never had. He would have explained to his father that none of these decorations was for uncommon valor. They were for common valor, the routine, daily stuff, just humping, just endearing. But that was worth something, wasn't it? Yes, it was, worth plenty. The ribbons looked good on the uniform in his closet, and if his father were to ask, he would have explained that each signified and what each signified and how he was proud of all of them, especially the combat infantryman's badge, because it meant that he had been there as a real soldier and had done all the things soldiers do, and therefore it wasn't such a big deal that he could not bring himself to be uncommonly brave. And then he would have talked about the medal he did not win, and why he did not win it. "I almost won the Silver Star," he would have said. "How's that?" "Just a story." "So, tell me," his father would have said. Slowly then, circling the lake, Norman Boker would have started by describing the Song-Tra-Bong. "A river," he would have said. "This slow, flat, muddy river." He would have explained how during dry season it was exactly like any other river, except nothing special, but how in October the monsoons began, and the whole situation changed. For a solid week the rains never stopped. Not once. And so, after a few days, the Song-Tra-Bong overflowed, and its banks and the land turned into a deep, thick mud for a quarter mile or on either side. Just muck. No other word for it. Like quicksand, almost, except the stink was incredible. You couldn't even sleep, he'd tell his father. At night, you'd find a high spot, and you'd doze off. But then, later, you'd wake up because you'd be buried in all that slime. You'd just sink in. You'd feel it ooze up over your body and sort of suck you down. And the whole time, there's this constant rain. I mean, it never stopped. Not ever. "Sounds pretty wet," his father would have said, pausing briefly. "So, what happened? You really want to hear this?" "Hey, I'm your father." Norman Boker smiled. He looked out across the lake and imagined the feel of his tongue against the truth. "Well, this one night out by the river, I wasn't very brave." "You have 7 medals." "Sure. 7. Count 'em. You weren't a coward either." "Well, maybe not. But I had the chance and I blew it. The stink, that's what got to me. I couldn't take that goddamn awful smell." "If you don't want to say more." "I do want to." "All right then. Slow and sweet, take your time." The road descended into the outskirts of town, turning northwest past the junior college and the tennis courts, and past Chautauqua Park, and the picnic tables were spread with sheets of colored plastic where the picnickers sat in lawn chairs and listened to the high school band playing Sousa marches under the band shell. The music faded after a few blocks. He drove beneath a canopy of elms, then along a stretch of an open shore, and past the municipal docks. I don't know that word. Where's my sticky note? 137. Past the docks. Where a woman in pedal pushers stood causing for bullheads. There were no other fish in the lake except for perch and a few worthless carp. It was a bad lake for swimming and fishing both. We drove slowly. No hurry, nowhere to go. Inside the Chevy, the air was cool and oily smelling, and he took pleasure in the steady sounds of the engine and air conditioning. A tour bus feeling, in a way, except the town was touring seemed dead. Though the windows, as if in a stop-motion photograph, the place looked as if it had been hit by nerve gas, everything still and lifeless, even the people. The town could not talk, and would not listen. "How do you like to hear about the war?" he might have asked. But the place could only blink and shrug. It had no memory, therefore no guilt. The taxes got paid, and the votes got counted, and the agencies of government did their work briskly and politely. It was a brisk, polite town. It did not know shit about shit, and did not care to know. Norman Boker leaned back and considered what he might have said on the subject. He knew shit. It was his specialty, the smell in particular, but also the numerous varieties of texture and taste. Someday he'd give a lecture on the topic, put on a suit and tie and stand up in front of the Kiwanis Club and tell the fuckers about all the wonderful shit he knew. Pass out samples, maybe. What the hell? Okay. How many more pages till the end of this chapter? Too many, I'm sure. Yeah, this one still has 4 more, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more pages.
Really? No way. That's crazy. What trick were you doing? What? What, he left?
Okay. Trying to find where I was. Smiling at this, he clapped the steering wheel slightly right of center, which produced a smooth clockwise motion against the curve of the road. The Chevy seemed to know its own way. The sun was lower now, 5:55, he decided. Yeah, I know it's just you, Keeney. It's kind of sad. I mean, it's not sad that you're here, it's just... It's not sad that you're here, it's sad that you're the only one here. I kind of wish there were a few more people watching, but, I mean, it's kind of a bad hour to be streaming, just because I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't active. Most of my viewers are American, and right now it's not time for Americans to be awake, so makes sense that be struggling. Okay. Smelling at this. Right at center, produce a smooth, clockwise motion against the curve of the road. The Chevy seemed to know its own way. The sun was lower now, 5:55, he decided. 6 o'clock tops. Along an unused railway spur, 4 workmen labored in the shadowy red heat, setting up a platform. Setting up a platform and steel launchers for the evening's fireworks. They were dressed alike in khaki trousers, work shirts, visored caps, and brown boots. Their faces were dark and smudgy. "Want to hear about the silver star I almost won?" Norman Boker whispered, but none of the workmen looked up. Later, they would blow color into the sky. The lake would sparkle with reds and blues and greens like a mirror, and the picnickers would make loud sounds of appreciation. Well, see, never stopped raining. he would have said. The muck was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it. He would have paused for a second. Then he would have told about the night they bivouacked in a field along the Song-Trabong. I don't know that word either. 138. Okay. Hey, Gustavo. Alright. Where's the word? In a field along the Song-Trabong, a big swampy field beside the river. There was a ville nearby, 50 meters downstream, and right away a dozen old Mama-Sans ran out and started yelling. A crazy scene, he would have said. The Mama-Sans just stood there in the rain, soaking wet, yapping away about how this field was bad news. Number 10, they'd said. Evil ground. Not a good spot for good GIs. Finally, Lieutenant Jimmy Cross had to get out his pistol and fire off a few rounds, just to shoo them away. By then, it was almost dark. So they set up a perimeter, ate chow, and then crawled under their ponchos and tried to settle in for the night. Hey, Cryptics. But the rain kept getting worse, and by midnight the field turned into soup. Just this deep, oozy soup, he would have said. Like sewage or something, thick and mushy. You couldn't sleep. You couldn't even lie down, not for long, because you'd start to sink under the soup. Really clammy. You could feel the crud coming up inside your boots and pants. Here, Norman Bowker would have squinted against the low sun. He would have kept his voice cool, no self-pity. But the worst part, he would have said quietly, was the smell. Partly it was the river, a dead fish smell. But it was something else, too. Finally, somebody figured it out. What this was, it was a shit field. The village toilet. No indoor plumbing, right? So they used the field. I mean, we were camping in a goddamn shit field. He imagined Sally Kramer closing her eyes. If she were here with him in the car, she would have said, "Stop it. I don't like that word." That's what it was. All right, but you don't have to use that word. Fine. What should we call it? She would have glared at him and said, "I don't know, just stop it." Clearly, he thought, this was not a story for Sally Kramer. She was Sally Gustafson now. No doubt Max would have liked it, the irony in particular, but Max had become a pure idea, which was its own irony. It was just too bad. If his father were here, riding shotgun around the lake, the old man might have glanced over for a second, understanding perfectly well that it was not a question of offensive language, but of fact. His father would have sighed and folded his arms and waited. A shipfield, Norman Bowker would have said. And later that night, I could have won the Silver Star for valor. Right, his father would have murmured. I hear you. The Chevy rolled smoothly across the viaduct and up the narrow tar road. To the right was open lake. To the left, across the road, most of the lawns were scorched dry like October corn. Hopefully, round and round, the rotating sprinkler scattered lake water on Dr. Manson's vegetable garden. Already the prairie had been baked dry, but in August it would get worse. The lake would turn green with algae, and the golf course would burn up, and the dragonflies would crack open for want of good water. The big Chevy curved past Centennial Beach for the A&W root beer stand. It was his 8th revolution around the lake, so he's just driving in circles around the lake right now. I'm going to put a green on there for important. Driving circles around the lake like he is driving circles around with his thoughts. Okay. He followed the road past the handsome houses with their docks and wooden shingles, back to Slater Park across the causeway. Hello. Around the Sunset Park and through riding, and as though riding on the tracks. Sorry, I can't read. The two little boys were still trudging along on their 7-mile hike. Out on the lake, the man in the stalled motorboat still fiddled with his engine. The pair of mud hens floated like wooden decoys, and the water skiers looked tanned and athletic, not authentic. And the high school band was packing up its instruments, and the woman in pedal pushers patiently rebaited her hook for another try. Quaint, he thought. A hot summer day, and it was all pretty quaint and remote. The 4 workmen had almost completed their preparations for the evening fireworks. Facing the sun again, Norman Boker decided it was nearly 7 o'clock. Not much later, he tried radio announcer confirmed it. Oh, tired. I kept reading tried for some reason. Not much later, the tired radio announcer confirmed it, his voice rocking itself into a deep Sunday snooze. If Max Arnold were here, he would say something about the announcer's fatigue, or relate it to the bright pink in the sky, and the war and courage. A pity that Max was gone. And a pity about his father, who had his own war, and who now preferred silence. Still, there was so much to say. How the rain never stopped. How the cold worked into your bones. Sometimes the bravest thing on earth was to sit through the night and feel the cold in your bones. Courage was not always a matter of yes or no. Sometimes it came in degrees, like the cold. Sometimes you were very brave up to a point, and then beyond that point you were not so brave. In certain situations, you could do incredible things. You could advance toward enemy fire. But in other situations, which were not nearly so bad, you had trouble keeping your eyes open. Oh, that makes me think of earlier in the book when that one guy is like super like big and buff and loves all the fighting and war stuff, but then when the dentist came, he like passed out. Right here. Sometimes, like that night in the ship field, the difference between courage and cowardice was something small and stupid. The way the earth bubbled, and the smell. In a soft voice without flourishes, he would have told the exact truth. Late in the night, he would have said, we took some mortar fire. He would have explained how it was still raining and how the clouds were pasted to the field, and how the mortar rounds seemed to come right out of the clouds. Everything went black and wet. The field just exploded, rain and slop and shrapnel. Nowhere to run, and all they could do was worm down into slime and cover up and wait. He would have described the crazy things he saw, unnatural things, like how at one point he noticed a guy lying next to him in the sludge completely buried except for his face, and how after a moment the guy rolled his eyes and winked at him. The noise was fierce, heavy thunder and mortar sounds, and people yelling. Some of the men began shooting up flares, red and green and silver flares, all colors, and the rain came down in technicolor. The field was boiling. The shells made deep, slushy craters, opening up all those years of waste, centuries' worth, and the smell became bubbling out of the earth. 2 rounds hit close by, then a third, even closer, and immediately, off to his left, he heard somebody screaming. It was Kiowa. He knew that. The sound was ragged and clotted up, but even so, he knew the voice. A strange gargling noise. Rolling sideways, he crawled toward the screaming in the dark. The rain was hard and steady. Along the perimeter, there were quick bursts of gunfire. Another round hit nearby, spraying up shit and water, and for a few moments he ducked down beneath the mud. He heard the values in his heart. He heard the quick, feathering action of the hinges. Extraordinary, he thought. As he came up, a pair of red flares puffed open. A soft, blurry glow, and in the glow he saw Kiowa's wide-open eyes settling down into the scum. All he could do was watch. He heard himself moan. Then he moved again, crabbing forward. But when he got there, Kiowa was almost completely under. There was a knee. There was an arm and a gold wristwatch, and part of a boot. He could not describe what happened next, not ever, but he would have tried anyway. He would have spoken carefully so as to make it real for anyone who would listen. There were bubbles where Kiowa's head should have been. The left hand was curled open, the fingers were filthy. The wristwatch gave off a green phosphorescent shine as it slipped beneath the thick waters. He would have talked about this, and how it grabbed Kiowa by the boot and tried to pull him out. He pulled hard, but Kiowa was gone, and then suddenly he felt himself going too. It was in his eyes and nose. There were flares and mortar sounds, and the stink was everywhere. It was inside him, in his lungs, and he could no longer tolerate it. Not here, he thought, not like this. He released Kiowa's boot and watched it slide away. Slowly, working his way up, he hoisted himself out of the deep mud, and then he lay still and tasted it in his mouth, and closed his eyes and listened to the rain and explosion and bubbling sounds. He was alone. He had lost his weapon, but it didn't matter. All he wanted was a bath. Nothing else, a hot, soapy bath. Circling the lake, Norman Boker remembered how his friend Kiowa had disappeared under the waist in water. It didn't flip out, he would have said. Okay.